Okay, everyone. Hi, it's Anthony Fantano here, aka the bestest teethsises in the game. You know who it is, and it's time for another edition of Let's Argue, where I go online, I accept your hot takes, unpopular opinions, and tough questions, and I respond to the best ones. Let's go. Scoop! Scoopty whoop! I Love It is actually good, and Kanye continues to push artists around him. He made Pump sing, which is something we've never seen before. The singing on the track kind of sucks. And on top of it, I mean, just merely getting Lil Pump to sing, to me, doesn't necessarily say to me, whoa, he's really pushing these artists out here. He's really giving them a push. Kanye West is an old head gone clout chaser collaborating with Lil Pump, purposefully relating to the MV to Roblox to appeal to younger audiences. Listen, this is Kanye's MO. All throughout his career, he has grabbed onto artists who either are unique creatives or have new and refreshing ideas or even better ideas than he has, and then he sort of takes them under his wing, he works with them, he gains from them, and then he moves on to the next thing. That is literally what he has done since Jesus walks! And Kanye is not going to stop doing that. It's what he does. It's what he's going to keep doing. Authentic instrumentation is better than computer-generated beats. For example, stuff by A Tribe Called Quest or I by Kendrick Lamar. I understand what you're getting at, but maybe you don't quite grasp the sheer amount of versatility that producers are able to pull out of these digital audio workstations and a totally new league of synthesizers and digital software right now. Like the limits of what you can do with sound at this moment in time because of computers is almost limitless. Maybe things seem a little limited because of what you're hearing in the mainstream or in current music trends, but really, you can pretty much make almost any sound that you imagine in your head with a computer. As much as I love these two babies over here, I cannot say that is the case for them. If someone told me that if I didn't make a good album, I was going to die, and my instruments of choice were my bass guitars or a computer, I'd throw these out the fucking window and I'd pick the computer. Calling artists corny is an easy cop-out and just a catalyst for hateful bandwagons. You don't have to be profound to make good music, even if you're aiming for a more lyrical and meaningful approach. I get what you're saying here, but I think corny is an effective word and a good word to use when it does call for it. I think corny is a very specific thing, but here's the issue. You can't just throw corny out there and not back it up, not cite what exactly is corny. For a lot of casual music fans, it's just kind of a really lazy catch-all that people use in place of an actual critique. So I'm all for calling things corny, but if all you can say about a particular artist or song or album is that it's corny, that's about as constructive or as interesting as just saying, this sucks. Buh. I lose respect for artists that work with 6ix9ine. I usually separate the artist from the art, but in this case, it isn't art. I guess you're kind of arguing here that 6ix9ine has a bad past and he's unlikable, and that's why maybe you lose respect for other artists when they work with him. I think that's a valid point of view. But I guess I feel the same way, but maybe for a different reason. More because of the fact that, artistically speaking, 6ix9ine, his style, his lyrics, his delivery, it's not really that versatile, it's not really that memorable, it's not really interesting for more than a song or two at a time. Like, if 6ix9ine was obscure and had absolutely no clout and no hype and no popularity whatsoever, would Nicki Minaj want to work with him? Would Kanye want to work with him? No. Absolutely not. Which is more the thing that I find questionable. Not that 6ix9ine is what he is and that he does what he does, but it's just very obvious on the face that the only reason other artists want to work with him is just that he's popular, and that's it. The reason why the 10s are easily the worst decade in music is because gentrification of artsy neighborhoods and absurd rent costs have killed most cities' independent music scenes and replacing them with yuppies playing bedroom pop at the local craft brewery. You could sort of argue that this was part of the problem with some of the music in the aughts, but yeah, unfortunately, kind of an unaddressed problem going on with how shitty the economy is currently is that all this inequity and the struggle for people to meet their basic needs like rent, like food, like healthcare, has made being an artist uneconomical, especially if you're something like a touring band. And not that the embrace of technology in lieu of that has been entirely bad, it most certainly hasn't. There's been a lot of groundbreaking and incredible creativity as a result of that. Artists finding new ways to make the music they want to make in a cheap and economical fashion so that they're not breaking the bank and they can actually live off their art. But really what you're talking about here is such a friggin' can of worms, it's hard to really account for all the ways in which the bunk economic system in America right now has been potentially negatively impacting the current state of art. And yeah, there kind of is a problem with people who come into the music scene with a lot of class privilege because they can afford to be artists, meanwhile other people can't, and they don't really have anything interesting to say, and certainly have no way of relating to the struggles of average everyday people. Meanwhile, if you are somebody who doesn't really come from much and you want to actually make a living on your music, most likely you will have to compete in the dumbest, most repetitive, and flavor of the month trends imaginable just to scrape your way to a position where you're making a living. So yeah, it's sucks. It sucks. Do you think it's reasonable for someone to claim a favorite band if they've only listened to some of their work? I.e., is it reasonable for someone who loves Dark Side of the Moon, Animals, and The Wall to say one of their favorite bands is Pink Floyd, despite them not listening to their other stuff? I guess it's not entirely unreasonable to say that Pink Floyd is one of your favorite bands, but you better frickin' hear almost all of their records if you're going to try to say that they're your favorite band. The only other exception I would kind of make this for is in the case of artists who have a gigantic discography, much of which is totally irrelevant and not interesting and maybe even complete garbage, and there's really no use in listening to all the older stuff or a lot of the newer stuff, and maybe you just kind of stick to the classic shit where they were at their best. In that instance, I may say, okay, it's understandable that maybe Buckethead is one of your favorite artists, and I'm not saying Buckethead's discography is full of garbage, but it's a very gigantic discography, much of which even some of his most hardcore fans haven't heard every single lick of it. You overvalue and originality in your reviews. Kamikaze from Eminem is better than Veteran. I feel like you had a point in a potential conversation here, but then you really messed it up with the whole Eminem JPEG thing, because I didn't even dislike Kamikaze because it was unoriginal or not experimental enough. I mean, even at this point in Eminem's career, he still has a pretty original, one-of-a-kind sound. And sure, while I do love an album that's maybe a bit experimental every once in a while, like the new JPEG Mafia record, that's not even one of the most experimental albums that I've heard this year. There are actually lots of experimental records that I listen to throughout the year that I just don't review at all because I don't find them that interesting. I don't find them that gratifying. I think they're boring, so I just ignore them and you don't even know they exist. On top of it, there are tons of records that I review positively or favorably throughout the year that either have a mainstream appeal or, again, they're really not all that experimental. I mean, just recently, the new Idols album, not all that experimental, pretty much just like a straightforward punk and post-punk record. On top of that, the new Lewis Cole record, not really all that experimental. HMLTD, pretty much a post-punk throwback. Black Thought and Ninth Wonder, that's just pretty much boom-bappy, jazzy, lyrical hip-hop, pretty straightforward there. Originality, though, is a different argument, and I don't think favoring originality is a bad thing. Originality brings more diversity and variety to the table when it comes to a lot of different things to listen to. Because, hey, this person has an original sound. That person has an original sound. This other person has an original sound. So refreshing and amazing to be hit with all these different sounds. If all I had to listen to all day was Interpol, who was on their umpteenth record, and they still pretty much sound the same, and bands that sound like Interpol, I would much rather just not listen to music ever again, as much as I enjoy Turn on the Bright Lights. Argument here is a mess, and there's nothing wrong with favoring originality. Originality is good. Over here next to my head is another Let's Argue video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Let's Argue. Thank you, everyone. Mwah, 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 mwah. Forever.